up out there, YouTube? Double D here with Tournage du Bois. Welcome back. So a couple of weeks ago I went to SWAT, got to meet some amazing makers, see some cool demos, but I found some cool things too. So spent some money. Found these pin blanks from a company called Stadium Pin Blanks, and these are pieces of the flooring from Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, Kansas, home of the KU Jayhawks. Their first coach ever was Dr. James Naismith, who actually invented the game. It's called Allen Fieldhouse for Fog Allen, who was one of their biggest coaches for a long time. A very storied program, historical. But I have an art show coming up in Lawrence, Kansas, which is where the Jayhawks play. And so I got these. Each one of these blanks comes with a certificate of authenticity, giving a little bit of history about the blank, about the Allen Fieldhouse, about the program. But each pin that I make is going to come with one of these, and I'm hoping to have these ready to sell. But I wanted to do a project, just a quick, simple project on how these pins are made. This is one of my favorite kits. It's the Tycoon pin kit from Penn State Industries, and I'll put a link to that just down below. Super simple to make, in my opinion. They look super classy. Absolutely love these pin kits. So at any rate, let's get rolling. All right, so we take our pin blank, and if you do a lot of these at the same time, then it helps to keep them all numbered and together. That way you don't mix up your blanks and things like that. So what I typically do is I'll get out my tubes for the pin kit, and once again, this is, like I said, the Tycoon rollerball pin kit. Comes with all the pieces you need. So take the pin blank and you take your first piece, which is usually, I like to do the cap first, and you leave a little bit of room on each end. Make your mark. That's where the top is. So I then draw a line here so that I know when I put it on the lathe to turn it, I know where the center part is. And I'm going to put the number 1, and then I'll put the number 1 down here also. That way, if I end up doing multiples, I keep all the pin blanks together the way they need to go. So then I'm just going to line this one up and mark it as well. And then we're going to get that cut. So here we have it. Piece number 1, Allen Fieldhouse. So we're going to cut it on this line and this line. This, of course, lines everything up. And then we will get it drilled out. One thing I love about these pin kits is Penn State Industries puts in instructions with every one of their pin kits of this. Super detailed. If you don't know what you're doing, gets you through it. But the two pin blanks or the two drill bits that this takes is a 25/64, which is what I have right here, and a 15/32. So this one is for the cap, this one is for the body. So the longer piece is going to have this drill bit, the shorter piece is going to have this drill bit. So if you're doing several at a time, you want to put one drill bit in, and then you're going to drill all the caps, flip them around, and then change drill bits and then drill all the bodies. So it saves you a little bit of time, and that's why numbering them, make sure you keep the right blanks together as we go. Since we're only doing one for this video, then we'll just do it one at a time. It makes it easier, but I just want to show my process. Now we have our cap drilled, and we'll be ready to glue it up. So the next thing I always do is, once again, line it up. That's why we have that line there. And we have our body tube and our cap tube. So I like to make sure that it fits all the way through with no problems. That's what I want there. Once in a while you might have a burr or something like that from a drill bit if it's not quite sharp. So that's why I always like to check that. I also like to check to make sure I have plenty of room at the end. So there's a little bit of gap there, and if I just turn it around here, it's pretty flush with a little gap, but we'll clean that all up. But always make sure you have plenty of space. That's why you leave a little bit on each end. Now I'm going to use our medium from Star Bond. There is a link to their information down below where you can get a 15% discount. They also have a lot of new stuff out, like inlays, a 5-minute epoxy, things like that. Always use a glove too, because this is pretty sticky glue, and it does cure up pretty quickly. So we don't want to have an issue there. Put the glue on the tube. You want to have a pretty decent amount. We're going to just slide it in. We're going to be twisting the tube as it goes in. That spreads the glue all around and gets the best bond that way. And I like to leave relatively similar gaps at each end from the end of the pin tube. So we'll just set that down. We're going to repeat that for the body of the pin. Once again, put it in, rotate it around, move it in and out just a little bit to get it on any parts that you didn't get glue on. Just tap it down in there a little bit. And there you go. We'll let that cure up and we'll trim the ends and start turning. So now what we want to do is we're going to trim the end of the blank down to be flush with the tube itself. So we use our woodpecker's barrel trimmer. And we'll get this trimmed down. So now it's flush, and that way it'll line up together when we put it all together. Alright, so the next thing to contemplate in turning a pin like this, we obviously have this marked here, but when we get that turned, that mark is going to go away. So what I also do is I'll take the pin and I'm going to mark the inside of the tube where the ends go together. And what I try to do usually is mark the same side, not that that's going to matter down the road, but this way, after I get it turned, I still know which parts go together, so I can work to line that grain up. So that's the next step. And then what we'll do is we'll get our bushings out, our pin mandrel, and we'll get this on the lathe. Now there have been a couple of things that I have found. I've had this lathe for a little while now. Absolutely love the lathe. I think it's a great lathe. There's a couple of things I'm not big fans of. Number one, and I went over this with the when I set up and did the walkthrough, there's no spindle lock. No spindle lock is not the end of the world in most circumstances. But when you're trying to get the chuck on and off over a certain amount of time, that kind of thing, it just gets to be difficult, especially if you normally work a lot with the chuck and now you're not. It just tends to make that getting the chuck on and off just a little bit more difficult. It's just an extra step that you got to do. Now the biggest gripe that I have with this lathe, and to me it just feels kind of chintzy. And the biggest gripe, like I said, that I have with this lathe is that there is not a self-eject on the tailstock. A lot of you might wonder why that's important until you have one of the other style pin mandrels that the bar will pass through into the tailstock. Because when you go to try and use the knockout bar to knock it out, it doesn't work because it's open. Like this is a one-way live center. Love this one-way live center, but you have a knockout bar so you can take this tip out. So the knockout bar that you would need to use to eject the piece will actually go right into that tube and makes it very difficult to do the knockout. So just keep that in mind. I think, like I said, I think that's kind of a cheap route that Rikon went with this lathe. My Harbor Freight benchtop lathe had a self-eject. My Jet had a self-eject. Not quite sure why this Rikon did not put an ejecting tailstock on. That being said, though, like I said, I'm not complaining that much. It's something I've just learned to work with. Either that or supply a bigger knockout bar that'll fit that diameter better so you can knock out pieces that have a pass-through. At any rate, got our piece on with our bushings. Let's get this pin turned. little bit of denatured alcohol just to clean up that grate a little bit. Now we're going to use our Brad's abrasive paste. Then we're going to use our Tung wax for the finish. And this is just a nice looking clean maple, is all the wood is. It's what a lot of the basketball floors are made of. You don't want a soft wood like pine. You want something that's a harder wood to get for more durability, of course. And now to our Tung wax finish. Here is a link to Brad's Etsy store down below. If you want to try some of this finish out, it works great. Nice durable finish. So what we'll do is we'll put this on, we'll leave it sit for at least 15 minutes to really just soak into that wood. Then we will come back, buff that off, and then we'll be ready to assemble the pen. Once again, with this Tung wax finish, you want to build up a little bit of heat. That'll just melt the wax right into the wood to give it that nice long-term durable finish. You just good pressure on it. You'll feel that heat build up into the rag through the fingers. Sometimes it gets just a little bit warm, but then you just work it back and forth. It melts that wax right in. And then we're ready to assemble it. All right, so we have our pen kit here, and we have our tubes marked so we know which part goes in the middle. That black mark, hopefully you can see that right in here. But now we know which pieces go together, and then we'll be able to line everything up. So knowing what parts there are and how they go, that's key. So the nice thing is I've done this kit enough to know what order things go in on. So that's obviously the cap. As you can tell, pieces aren't going to fit into that kind of a situation, so it's pretty self-explanatory as you go. So we know that this is the middle part, which makes the other end the back end, which is just what we want. So we've got these beauty rings that we put around these. These allow for all the fittings and things to screw together. So we'll just kind of push that together, let that seat. Now I know that this is the middle portion, so I'm actually going to put the back end on first. So we now know that's the back end of the pen. We have our spring. Put the spring right down in there. We have our ink cartridge, which we'll put down and take the cap off of. And then we have our nib, and in the nib is going to push down and then screw in. You now have the body of the pen together. Then we have our cap, and we know that this end is going to be the top because our black mark is in this end, which is where it goes together. So that means the portion, the clip, along with the top part, goes in to that end. I'm going to kind of rough fit that, get it started to seat, and then I'll figure out where I want the clip to go. So obviously it's going to run with the grain, so I don't want to take away from any of that grain. I've got this wide open place right here, so that's where we're going to keep that clip, right in the middle of that. So then that doesn't take anything away from that portion. Now comes the tricky part with getting it to line up. So I always take this portion, which is the bottom part of the cap, and I'm going to screw that all the way on. That way, when I put that together, I know exactly it's going to line up the way I want it to. So we've got this wide portion here, and that's going to match up with the wide portion at the top. You can see the graining there a little bit runs through. So this is how it needs to go together. for that to line up. So we'll get that started. And then we will just push that together. Everything lined up the way we want it to. And that is our completed pin. Everything lines up with the graining. And that is our KU pin. Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed that project where we took our KU flooring from the Allen Fieldhouse and made our pin. So that is our nice maple pin with the graining throughout, with the Tycoon pin kit from Penn State Industries. I really like rollerballs. I like how they feel. I like how they write, and it adds a certain touch of class, in my opinion, to the piece. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If not, give it a thumbs down. If this is your first time here, please do consider subscribing. Leave your comments, feedback down below. I do read and respond to all of them, and they help me improve my videos. So I will catch you all next time.